All right, hello everyone. We're back. We're back, baby. It's been, I think, a month, a little over a month since the last episode in the SkyTown Pod, a Chicago Sky and WNBA podcast hosted by myself, Garrett Neal. Just a guy who, even in the toughest of toughest times, loves the Chicago Sky and just wants to get the good word out there. And don't have a great excuse for missing all this time. I mean, obviously, this is just something I'm doing for fun right now. I have a whole other job and lots of other hobbies and things that I like to do. I did go to All-Star Weekend, which I'll talk about a little bit, and have had some stuff going on at work and just was doing other things. But I did say that I wanted to get this going through at least one full season. And so I wanted to I thought about hey, maybe I'll just stop, maybe I'll just quit, but I wanted to go through one season, so bring it back, and hopefully over the remainder of the season, even though there's not that much left at this point for the Sky, I think there's 15 or 16 games left at this point, but want to be a little more consistent and carry it out even through the playoffs, even though the Sky most likely not going to be playing at that time. But on top of that, just wanting to kind of follow through on something I set out for myself, but also even though the Sky have not been super exciting to watch recently, and personally, I have to say, up until the All-Star break, I'd watched every single game. It has not been the case since then. There's definitely been a number of games I have not watched the whole thing. There's even been a couple of games I haven't watched at all. There's been a lot of bad basketball by this team since the All-Star break, unfortunately, for a handful of reasons, which we'll get into. But it's been tough for the Chicago Sky right now, but things have started piling up. I have a lot of thoughts. I wanted to get it out there because, as I mentioned in the first episode when I started this podcast, even though I have a lot of friends that kind of watch women's basketball for a little bit here and there, even some pretty hardcore fans that are season ticket holders, there's just some things that a level of it that they just don't like to talk about as much as I do. So that's why I wanted to get into, and just had all these thoughts bouncing around my brain, and this is at least one way to get it out besides just talking to myself, which I still do anyway. And another thing was just a reminder of how little coverage this kind of stuff gets, at least to the level that I think it deserves, where I'm following, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, like all these, again, not even just WNBA podcasts, women's basketball podcasts have all sorts of things to draw from that are backed by big networks like The Athletic, The Ringer, and we're getting updates once a week, once every 2 weeks. Meanwhile, NFL training camp just started, and we're getting updates from these places every day about all kinds of random stuff. It's training camp. Like, a bunch of the guys in training camp don't even make the team, and there's always these crazy training camp narratives that never translate to the regular season, but that stuff's still super fun to talk about. And those guys who don't make the team, their stories still deserve to be told, all that sort of stuff. And I want women's sports to get to that point. I want the WNBA to get to that point where these networks are putting in that effort, that energy to because there are those stories to be told, whether it's mini camp or training camp way at the beginning of the season, or where the WNBA is right now. It's the home stretch of the season. Yeah, for the Sky, there's not a lot going on, but for the rest of the league, there's a ton of stuff going on. New York Liberty falling apart. The Sun are the Mercury are just the Sun, but different now. They brought in DeWanna Bonner back. They're reuniting everybody. They're playing great. The Storm been a little up and down. And there's a whole clump of teams. The Aces, what's going on with the Aces? They're playing like garbage. And there's a whole chunk of teams from like 2 to 8 that are all grouped together. Anyone could go anywhere. What are we talking? We should be going day by day. day by day. Standings update. What does this win mean for this team? Does this loss, are the aces done? Should Asia Wilson leave? Where's all this stuff? I mean, yes, some of that stuff, like I hate it when you're watching the NBA, the NFL, the whatever, MLB. I don't really pay attention to baseball that much. I've been getting into it a little bit more recently, But like you get all the big the like top tier sports leagues. You're getting all this crazy stuff that's really annoying to hear from the big networks where they're having the same 4 or 5 arguments over and over again that aren't really based in anything but opinion and conjecture. But even on the more granular level, again, like I talked about when I started this podcast, you have those great podcasts that are going really in detail, really going through the fine minutia of these teams, the offenses they're running, the analytics, what's working, why is it working, all that sort of stuff. And just seeing all, like, having that comparison of, like, we're in the home stretch of the season for the WNBA, and I'm getting one podcast every week or two from these big networks versus the stuff you get for, like, the NFL during the most meaningless time of the season was another reason where I'm like, hey man, if I can just stick with this, I think there's really there's something here, because again, from that's from the league perspective, there's still so many WNBA podcasts that aren't super consistent, and there's even less team specific ones. I mean, there's a couple of Chicago Sky ones, as I said, some of which I like, some of which not as much, but even the ones I like, they're coming out only slightly more frequently than mine is. So they're maybe sticking to their once every 2 week schedule, whereas I have not been as much during this second half of the season. But as I said, we're back now. Hopefully we can keep it going through the rest of the season. But that was just kind of some stuff that's been on my mind. But it's probably not going to be the longest episode, not the most analytical, in-depth episode like I've had the last couple before I took that break. But again, I just wanted to make sure I get something out there, get some of these thoughts off my mind. What are we going to talk about? Well, we're going to talk about the All-Star game and the All-Star weekend, because I was there, baby. It was super fun. Of course, being a Chicago Sky fan, based in Chicago, Indianapolis, just a short 3.5 hour drive away. Actually, I don't even think it's 3.5. I think it's just like 3 hour drive. And tickets were super cheap. Especially once they announced that Caitlin Clark was not going to be playing. And I just wanted to go there because you never know when it's going to be back in the area, and you never know what prices are going to be like, because as the sport hopefully continues to grow, it's probably only going to get more and more expensive. You look at the prices of NBA All-Star Weekend, crazy stuff for what frankly is not a great product. I'm sure it's fun to go, because that's what I would say for like my experience, as it was fun to be there, even though the stuff that happened on the court was not great. So I get it. I get why prices are expensive, but crazy for the NBA. And this was fairly cheap. We'll get into that, talk about what's been up with the Sky, what it means for this season, what it means for future seasons. Talk a little CBA, because we're starting to get some little trickles of news coming out about the CBA and what's been going on there. There was some drama in All-Star Weekend about that too. So we'll talk a little bit about that, and then what it means for the Sky going forward, and talk about what's going on around the league, because frankly, that's a lot more fun to talk about than what's going on with the Sky right now. So that's kind of all coming up in a nutshell. Going to take a quick pause for some water. Great. Hydrated. Now we're going to jump into it. Which again, eventually, maybe next season, if I come back next season, I'll get some nice audio or something like that. But All-Star Weekend, super fun. Again, not too far from where I am. I did not go to the game, but I went to the 3-point contest and skills competition on Friday night, and that was pretty fun. Again, it would have been nicer. Caitlin Clark was playing. Getting that Caitlin Clark for Sabrina in the finals could have been really cool. But mainly, and tickets were like $15-20 for that. And it was really cool because even just being in Gamebridge Fieldhouse for that was really cool. I ran into Nneka Ogwumike just like walking around the building. She was there for some TV stuff with her sister, and there was a couple like retired players saw around. And so there's just like, and like media personalities that I recognize, all sorts of stuff. People were just around the building. So even though like my seat was literally in the highest possible row in the building, and I almost fell one time, was kind of scary. Still have a bit of a mark on my ankle from that, even though that was like 3 weeks ago at this point, but had a little bit, but it was still super fun. And just being in with that atmosphere, even if, again, the skills competition, I mean, the 3-point contest was still pretty cool. I mean, Sabrina hit like, I was like, I don't remember, like a crazy number of threes in a row, still put up 30 points. Not quite as crazy as the other year she did it, but still pretty awesome. It was like 2 years ago. And skills competition was kind of okay. We need to figure out the rules for that one. It seems like a pretty easy fix. I feel like after the All-Star break, there was a couple outlets talking about this, but the skills competition right now, there's no punishment for missing shots. You have to like complete a couple passes and make a couple shots, dribble around some stuff, and it's just like a little relay where you're going through those stations, and whoever finished first wins. But on the passes, or on most of the passes at least, like you have to complete it before you move on. But for the shots, you have like 3 balls on a rack, and once you shoot the 3 balls that are there, you just move on regardless of whether you made it or missed. So at a certain point, you can just chuck up the 3 balls really fast and move on, and there's no penalty for that. And there was an issue with this in the NBA last year where the Spurs were trying to like use that to their advantage and were basically just like knocking the balls over as fast as possible so they could move on to the next thing. But it's like, you just like add in a time penalty. Like if you don't make the shot and you use all 3 shots, then you get like an added couple seconds on your time. Like that should have been there in the first place, but a little silly, but it's still fun. I think it would be nice if they could add in another event. I think that's something that's been talked about. There was the Shooting Stars contest that used to be in the NBA All-Star Friday night a while back. I know I've heard some other podcasts talk about. It's all right. It's a pretty I remember enjoying it when it used to be on, just because you get to see a bunch of different eras of basketball players come together. And in the NBA level, it would be like one current player from a team, one WNBA player, and then like an NBA legend. And you have to shoot like certain number of mid-range, certain number of threes, and then you always ended with a half-court shot, which was always super fun to see. Like, who's the best half-court shot shooter, So something like that, or bring in like something like the one-on-one tournament that we saw a little preview of in Unrivaled, or Horse. I know Horse has been tried a couple times in the NBA. It hasn't always worked out, but it would be nice to have like a little bit of something to just expand it out a little bit. I mean, I like that they're not trying to drag it out so much. I mean, if you watch the NBA All-Star Friday night this past year, I mean, man, TNT really bungled that one up. There was just so many stoppages for bits and like announcements, and on top of commercial breaks themselves. And it really just, I don't know how it felt to be in the building, but watching it was horrible. This does not have that problem, which is great, but it was like an hour. Like, just being in the stadium was an hour long. And I could definitely go for like another 20-30 minutes if you want to throw another event in there. So there's that. But on top of that, there was WNBA Live, which I had no idea what to expect. This was in the convention center. And if you've never been to Indianapolis before, It's not a huge city, but one of the cool things is kind of connected to that is the convention center is right down the street from the Gainbridge Fieldhouse where they were playing. So that entire street that was connecting them was totally closed off, and they just had a bunch of stuff up there. There was like, restaurants that are on that street were out doing little activations there. They had like a bar set up there, a bunch of fun little picture taking spots, places to sit and relax, and all sorts of fun stuff going up and down that street. They were handing out posters, super fun, and just kind of created like a little all-star bubble where you could go, from the stadium to the convention center and kind of stay within all the celebrations that were happening there for All-Star Weekend. And what WNBA Live was an additional ticketed event. Tickets were only $25, which was not too bad, and I think was a fair price because it's one of those things where you go in there and it's basically a whole bunch of ads for different WNBA sponsors. You've got the Starry 3-point challenge. You've got the Google Pixel blah, blah, blah. You've got the Coach whatever. You've got the Sephora, this, or not Sephora. Sephora is with, or I guess they do stuff with the WNBA as well, but they do a lot of unrivaled stuff. So anyway, you got all these brands out here, CarMax, all this stuff. And they all have like these little games and challenges and like raffles and all this stuff you could do that, again, is all just to get you on their email list or to try and get you to buy something or to show you how great their products are. It's a whole bunch of ads. So I'm glad they didn't charge a lot because there's a lot of that. There's a lot of ads. And for a lot of places, this is the kind of stuff you get into for free because you're helping the company out by showing up and letting them sell you on stuff. But the big sell is the player appearances. Now, myself, I did a little bit of research trying to figure out what the heck this was going to be going in, but couldn't find a lot right away. Maybe if I dug a little deeper, I could have found some more stuff. But so I think some other people got a lot more out of this event than I did. But basically, you get there and each setup, right? Each setup that each company has like a schedule of players that are going to be there during what times. Now, there was an additional app besides the WNBA app. There's the WNBA Events app, which I'd never heard of before. You could download to get the whole schedule together. Now, it took me a while to figure that out because there wasn't a lot of signage that I could see in regarding that, but they were making announcements every 10, 15, maybe not, like 15, 20 minutes or so about that from the center court where they had a big, like a legit hardwood floor with some baskets set up there that you could go out there and shoot around on, which I did. It was super fun because I love basketball, and being able to shoot around on a legit WNBA court was pretty cool, even if it was set up in the middle of a convention center instead of, in a arena. It was still really cool. But once I got that downloaded, I started to figure things out. But initially, I got in there, I came up Friday midday, got in there like 12:30, 1 o'clock, and there's just lines everywhere. Now, it just so happened that the time I was getting there was right as Paige Beckers was about to show up in one area, and had just shown up in one area. Caitlin Clark was going to show up in this other area later. It was her only appearance of the day. Paige Beckers, to her credit, has several appearances throughout the day, which I was impressed by. There was one, we'll get to that. So it happened to be that there was a lot of lines at that time. It's also right in the middle of the day, so everyone was there. And for the first like 30, 40 minutes, like I just kind of walked around like, what the hell's going on? This sucks. There's a line for everything. This is horrible. But once I kind of figured out where everything was, found the app, started figuring out, I could kind of plan my schedule a little bit to try and figure out where I wanted to be at what times, who I wanted to see. Now, the other tough thing was it was not clear on the app or on the schedules who was there taking pictures, who was there signing autographs, who was there just kind of around. Some people were doing like media appearances kind of thing where they're just chatting with like a representative from the company, where again they're basically just like, you get a couple like softball questions like, oh, how'd you prepare for your season this year, what's it like being on a new team or whatever. And then like, how has the Google, I watched one of the Google things, is why I'm using Google, but how did the Google help you and blah blah blah. And then it's like, wow, this product is so again, ads. And that was unclear, which was kind of a shame, because there are some times where we're setting up like, oh man, Kelsey Plum's going to be here. That's going to be super cool. She's one of my favorite players. And then it's like, oh, we're just sitting here watching like a canned interview basically for 30 minutes. And that kind of feels like a waste of time. Like, yes, it's nice. She's there like 20 feet away. Cool. But like, I'm not one of these people that's like so into celebrity culture where just like sitting in the same room as this person is really like, whoa. Like, again, being even more so at WNBA Live versus at the Gainbridge Fieldhouse for the Friday night festivities, there were players just walking around. And they were just walking around. I'd be like, oh, yo, what's up? They might take a couple pictures, with that sort of stuff. And that was really cool. Just, again, being around the players like that. But, again, I'm not so huge into celebrity culture where we have people who are coming in like, oh, I got to be here. I got this, that, blah, 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 blah. Oh, I was waiting this long for I could. And, like me, I'm like, I'm not going to wait an hour to meet Paige Beckers. Like, I'm sorry. That's just, it would be cool, but it's not worth that long to me. There's other stuff I can be doing. So those times where I was like trying to see a player, maybe get a picture, maybe get an autograph, and end up being that just little kind of talk back, that was a little frustrating because I would have spent my time differently had I known that. But still got to do a few things. Got to meet Alyssa Thomas. She was taking pictures, doing a little chat at one area. She's one of my favorite players. That was cool. Panini had a booth. Panini, also the event sponsor itself, where they were having players sign like jumbo trading cards, and they were not taking pictures because they were trying to move their line. That was kind of the weird thing with there, is like, yes, you get the signature, you get to see the player, but like the player was not doing a lot of talking. Like, I mean, they were trying to be nice about it, but like they were the people who were running the event were like really like, hey, no pictures, sorry, let's keep the line moving, thank you guys for coming, no pictures please, like really trying to get the line moving. So you didn't really get necessarily that interaction with the player, but you got a cool little, let's see if I can get, if you're watching on YouTube, I got to see Brianna Stewart. Let me see a signature there, which was cool, and I like the design of the jumbo cards. Pretty fun. They got the stats and stuff on the back, so that was cool. But the interaction part with the player was a little weird. Now, this is one that I waited for a little bit, and it was initially Paige Beckers, and then Brianna Stewart was going to join later, and there was like a period of time where they were supposed to be overlapping according to the schedule. So I kind of waited a little bit for that initial line to die down, try to see if I could squeak in towards the end, but for whatever reason, Paige had to leave early. I mean, she had a lot of events that day, so I have no doubt she is tired, probably had other places she got to be anyways. So I'm sure she's very in demand for a lot of things this weekend. So that was a bit of a shame, because as much as I was saying I wasn't going to wait in an hour-long line for Paige, and I waited like 20 minutes for Brianna Stewart, and I was hoping it was Brianna Stewart and Paige. And Brianna Stewart's great. It will be cool because you can see on Paige's card that it says rookie. So it does acknowledge that it's her rookie season for what I'm sure is going to be a really great and very long, illustrious WNBA career. And that would have been a cool story to have. Be like, yeah, I got to meet Paige in her rookie season at WNBA All-Star Weekend, and got her autograph on this card. So that would have been cool. It would have made the event way, way worth it. Like having these 2 signed cards would have been cool for sure. But even so, again, got to meet a couple of players. Alyssa Thomas, Brianna Stewart, got that one autograph card, which is still pretty cool because even though Paige Beckers might have a little bit more name recognition than Brianna Stewart is still one of the best WNBA players to ever lace them up. So don't get it twisted. That's still pretty sick. And there was a couple other players I saw walking around, and a couple of the games were fun, silly. Got some free stuff that's kind of junk, really, but it was cool to be there for sure. And I got to do a couple other fun things while I was there. Before on Saturday, I was going to the Unrivaled event because Unrivaled had a whole thing there as well, which was free to go to. And I got there early, which was good. But even before then, I went to the Indianapolis Sculpture Garden, which was very nice. And they had a basketball court there, which was super fun. It was like this weird sculpture basketball court. It was really silly, but they had a whole basket out there with balls. They were like, hey, feel free to shoot around. Just return the balls afterwards. And I was like, basketball at the Sculpture Garden? Don't mind if I do. That was pretty cool. Also, if you didn't know, if you haven't watched any games of the Fever, which I assume you would, that's like the one team that everybody watches, but Gainbridge Fieldhouse, where they play, has a basketball court outside of the basketball court. And I shot some hoops there too, which was super fun. So got to do a lot of fun basketball courts there. And the Unrivaled event was really interesting as well. Kind of very similar, where it's just a couple of much smaller than WNBA Live, but had some stations set up to kind of from a bunch of sponsors basically to promote stuff. And then had some player appearances, met Ray Burrell there, and Marina Mabry was there as well. But again, it was one of those things. She did like a little like interview, helped run like a little competition thing. So that was cool to see. And they also made a couple of big announcements in terms of players that are coming for next year. Basically, like all the big college players are coming to Unrivaled. So that's going to be really cool to see for next year. And Unrivaled is going to be really interesting to see how that goes. I thought it was really great, fun to watch last year. And I think it's great that a lot of these top players are having a place to play here in the United States, because I think that it's really good for a lot of their development. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of places around the world that have really great facilities that I'm sure can be great development for a lot of these players, and have been. There's been a lot of great players in the WNBA. However, the best players, for the most part, are still in the United States. And if you can get most of the best players in the world playing in Unrivaled over the WNBA offseason, that's going to be great for development for the most part. And you followed Unrivaled on social media, they're constantly posting about how well the players that played in Unrivaled are doing, which makes sense. But I think that there could be a connection there, because you get to play against better competition. You're in that area where you're just focused on basketball. You get to have actually a bit of an off season. It's not you're off playing a whole other regular season with a different team away from your family or all that sort of stuff. It's like, and I get like a lot of the players who have been in the W for a while, they have connections with those teams. They play with the same team year after year, and they want to stay with that team. But for a lot of players, it's like, hey, you get to stay here, you get to be closer to your friends and family, and you get to be with the best players in the world, and you all get to grow together. And I thought that is what made Unrivaled so great. But as they're continuing to grow, it's almost like they're challenging the WNBA a little bit. And I do like that on the sense of, as we transition into another topic here, the CBA. Because at All-Star Weekend, one of the big pieces of news was all the players came out before the All-Star game wearing the pay us what you owe us t-shirts. And Unrivaled is paying the players a lot compared to the WNBA. And in fact, one of the high selling points of Unrivaled is the way that it cares for its players. You've got great gym facilities there. You've got a whole child care facility, basically, and plans for all that sort of stuff. You got all these things that are built around the players and focused on the players and making it a great experience for them. Now, I do think that there's some things that you can do at the level of Unrivaled that don't necessarily scale up to the level that the WNBA wants to operate at. However, they are making a good blueprint for the W and making a good proof of concept that the players can point to and be like, hey, here's another high-level league that a lot of your players are involved in that's doing XYZ for their players, and this is the result. Can we see that replicated to a certain extent in the W? And there's a lot of interesting conversations happening around the CBA right now. Very fortunate that we're starting to get some news there. Hopefully, as we continue, I think October is when the CBA's got to be negotiated by, I think. So it's coming up pretty fast here. We're starting to see some more news. It's another thing that, again, as the WNBA becomes more popular, like if this was the NBA, we'd be seeing all kinds of rumors flying around. Like, here's what they're talking about. Here's what's on the table. They're close on this. They're not close on this. Haven't seen or heard a lot about that. Now, again, I'm not the most active on social media in general, but from the podcasts that I follow, I feel like if there's real rumor, real news coming out, they'd be talking about it. So I haven't heard anything much, but the first couple meetings I do know did not seem to go very well. Now they've had at least one since then that I heard went a little bit better, but I know the big focal point is paying the players, basically. And like there's a lot of stuff involved in that in terms of player comfort and supporting your players with regulations on facilities, on travel, scheduling, all that sort of stuff. But I think the big thing is paying the players. And I haven't gotten a time to go into all of it just yet, but there's a couple of great articles actually on The Athletic where they're diving into how this all works. And there's kind of a strange setup that the WNBA has right now in regards to revenue sharing. And it's also, the article goes into the difference between revenue and profit, because there is a difference, and it is really important in this sense. And it's kind of tough for the W right now because it does have that strong monetary connection with the NBA. And so some of the money from the W kind of goes into that area, to my understanding. But in the NBA, the Players Association gets 51% of basketball-related income, and the owners get 49%. So that is kind of how that breaks down. And in the W, it is much, much, much smaller. And the other thing is that the way I believe they had it set up was that basically the players didn't earn a lot of the basketball-related income, but it would increase if they met certain benchmarks. But the benchmarks were cumulative. And a lot of these were in terms of like viewership and merch sales and all this sort of stuff. And the problem was that COVID happened, basically. And obviously during COVID, a lot of stuff like ticket sales, like attendance, sort of like dropped off completely because just what it was. And so because of that hole and that lost time, it basically has become impossible since then for the players to reach those goals and those benchmarks to progress to the higher levels of money available to them, because again, it's cumulative stuff and they basically lost a whole year, so they're just in that hole. So the players have not seen a growth in money available to them and money from the league that goes to them in the same way that the owners have as the league has grown over the last several years. And so I think there's a feeling that not only in this new CBA does it need to be set up in such a way that the players will get rewarded as the league grows, but there's also a sense that the players have been undercompensated so far. And so there's that kind of like, hey, now like we need to be set up going forward so that we can grow as the league grows, but also y'all owe us a little bit, so y'all got to give us a little chunk of change coming out of the gate in this next year as well. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that goes, and hopefully we'll get some more news out of that camp, those camps, as we get even closer, even though I think, again, it's only like a couple months away at this point, 2.5 maybe months away, like late October. So that's going to be really interesting. It's going to really shape the offseason, which is going to be a really important offseason for the Chicago Sky, because this season is over big time. The Sky, I think, are sitting at 7-21 right now, 12th in the league. Once again, there are 13 teams, so just out of last place. And it is really tough because I think right up to the All-Star break, maybe a couple games after, this team is playing some of the best basketball. No, not some of. They playing the best basketball they played all year, and it really looked for a stretch there like they could push into that subsection of teams like the Aces, apparently, and the Mystics, who are right around 500, jockeying for that kind of 7th, 8th spot in the playoffs. And then Ariel Atkins goes down. This is another thing in regards to media coverage around the W. Ariel Atkins has missed like 2 weeks, and we still have no idea what her injury is. Like, come on. Can we get something? All we got is leg injury. Like, guys, please, a little communication. Tell us what she got. Is there a timetable? Something, please. Like, again, if this was any other big league, you just know, because you're supposed to report this stuff for all, first of all, transparency for the league, transparency for the other teams, transparency for the fans, and like gambling, this stuff can be important. So I've heard. It's just good to know. Like, guys, please. So she goes down, hasn't played since, and that's now the top 2 ball handlers on the team gone. I'm assuming Ariel Atkins at this point is out for the season because, frankly, at this point, there's no reason for her to come back. This team's not going nowhere, okay? No reason for her to come back. Angel Reese has also been in and out of the lineup with back problems. Sit her. Let her come back when she's 110%, because this team ain't going nowhere. So, had a rash of injury problems. This team's been getting destroyed in games left and right. They've had a couple of games here and there where they kept it close. And a lot of times what happened is they keep it close for a couple of quarters and then they totally fall off a cliff. And frankly, in my mind, what happens in a lot of those types of games is that's what happens when you got a really talented team against a much less talented team. Because what happens is the much less talented team, most cases it's the Sky, that's why they're 12th out of 13th, or 12 out of 13, is because they got to play at their absolute best just to be close to the other team. Whereas the other team can play at that 75, 80, 85% level and still compete with the less talented team. So it takes way more effort for that less talented team just to keep up. And then if they get tired, they get exhausted, they make mistakes, things slip. And then all of a sudden that other team bumps it up from 85% to 90%. And then they just run away with everything because they have that level to go to. Whereas it's much harder to maintain that top level, top energy level of play for a whole game, which is what you need to do when you're a team like the Sky that's frankly not playing with a full set right now. And it's really unfortunate the way it has gone. You feel for everybody when a team kind of just gets ravaged by injuries like this. It's got to be really tough mentally for the players, because not only for the people who have to battle through these injuries and they have to watch the team struggle while they're out. I'm sure you get all those thoughts of like, I should be out there, I should be helping my team. And the people who are out there as well, like you get that, like the energy gets sapped. You know, we feel it as fans, that feeling of like, man, like we're just like the season's over, right? And it's really hard to keep going in the face of stuff like that. And you do have to give the team some credit. They're still going out there. They're playing, even though these games aren't particularly close. They're not very fun to watch, but you still got to play them, and they're playing. So props to them for that. But I hope that as the season continues, we start to see more and more minutes for people like Maddie Westbeld and Haley Van Lith. Let them get that experience. Let them make those mistakes. Let them develop as players. We got a hardship contract. I forget the name of the point guard they signed right now. She's like a veteran who came from another team. Let's get someone who got cut at the beginning of this year, who got drafted this year. Let's bring somebody in. See if they can develop. There's no reason to bring in a random veteran player who's not going to be on the team next year. See if you can't get some young talent in. See if they can't turn into something in this last part of the season, if you can sign them to that hardship contract where you can get them for like 10 games or something like that. Because at this point, there's really nothing else to play for besides developing the young players and keeping a little bit of pride as a team. And it's hard to say from the outside, like, it's easy to say that from the outside, because I'm sure, again, mentally on the inside, like you have to go out there every night saying like, hey, we got a chance to win. But you also, somebody in the organization has to have that wider scope to say, hey guys, we need to play those young players a little bit more. And hey, we need to let's sign a couple development projects, see what we can't see in these last couple weeks of the season. Someone has to have that wider scope. That's why the coach and the GM should not be the same position, because when you're the GM, when you're the coach, you have to be there day in, day out, game by game. When you're the GM, you have to be able to take that wider step back and take a look at the team. What are we doing now? What are we doing next year? What are we doing 5 years from now? That's your role as the general manager. And part of that is it's the draft. And I do not want to belabor this point, because this is something that I talked about ad nauseum in this podcast. But that's the Ariel Atkins trade. And I do not blame the team any more now than I did a month ago for making this trade, or even when they made the trade back in the off season, because I don't want to say because you could never predict that Ariel Atkins was going to have an injury like this. You just can't. That really sucks for everybody, especially Ariel. And I hope that she is able to come back and be a great player for whoever she plays for next season. Because, again, at this point, there's no reason for her to come back to play for the Sky this year. I just think that would be silly. But when you look at a team, like when I was watching the Celtics in 2013, 2014, the years after they traded Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett, the team was not great. It had a lot of random play. We had Gerald Wallace and Jared Sullinger and Chris Humphries and Marshawn Brooks and all these random guys. And frankly, the team still played okay because they had a really good coach, turned out to be a great coach in Brad Stevens. But watching those teams, even though the teams weren't great, I still had a lot of fun watching them because I knew what the goal was of the team. It was not to win. The goal was we've got 3 first-round draft picks coming up soon that are going to be great. And that is hope. And this team right now does not have a lot of hope right now because they don't have their first round. Because they don't have you still got to remember again, Angel and Camilla, they've had a lot of great games this year. They frankly in a lot of times looked way better than I thought they would be, and you've seen the value of Angel Reese because in the game she doesn't play, this team ain't got a shot of beating nobody. Nobody. When she plays, it can be close. When she doesn't play, I mean, you could just chalk that one up, basically. I mean, this team's just not even close. It's kind of embarrassing. But they've been really good this year, and they're still going to grow, and they're still going to get better, hopefully, especially with someone like Tyler Marsh at the helm who has that player development experience. Angel Reese seems like the kind of person, she don't need a push. She's going to keep working her butt off day in and day out because that's what she does. That's how she's built. Camilla seems like the type of person she's going to need that push a little bit to keep going, keep pushing herself to that next level. But hopefully they can do that. Now, we don't have like a young rookie this year to watch grow. And that takes out a little wind to your sails because you know that you could have. It's not a situation like, well, it's just out of our control, blah. It's like, no, we could have had, or this guy could have had a young star in the door this year that you get to watch, even if the team's losing games or not doing this. Like the Wings, right? The Wings are having a horrible season, but Paige Becker sure looks good, you know? And 2026 is going to be an offseason to change. They're probably going to ship darn near everybody off of that roster that isn't tied down, and they're going to build around Paige Beckers because she looks great and she's the future. And this team, well, we got the future. We got Angel Reese. We got Camilla. But what else do we have? I don't know. And you could have had that other player this year that even as the team's going down, it's like, well, Angel looks great. Camilla looks great. 3rd overall draft pick, whoever they chose to pick. Maybe it was Sonia. Maybe it's not. Well, they look pretty good too, or maybe we can see them look good as the season continues. And all we got is Haley. Haley's great. Well, I don't say she's great, but Haley's fun. But she was the back end of the first round for a reason. And she just doesn't have that same ceiling that some of those other players would have. But that being said, I still want to see her play a lot more towards the back half of the year. I think we've seen enough where she definitely has flashes. She's shown flashes of great talent, but she needs a lot more experience against this high-level competition. I hope we can give her that. This guy can give her that as the season goes on because she might not help you win games, but this team's not going to win a lot of games anyway. And there's just no point. There's just no point in doing something else, right? So that is where the trade comes back. Not because the injury makes it look any worse. As you can go listen to basically every episode of this show, I bring it up at least once because, frankly, that's how bad a trade this was. And this is just one other way it comes back to bite you is when you do have a season like this where it just kind of all falls apart and it's all going wrong, you've got nothing to fall back on now because you put in all your chips for a aging star. I mean, Ariel Atkins is a great player, but I wouldn't even call her a star player. She made 2 All-Star teams like 3 seasons ago. Like she is a very good player. She's not in the Hall of Fame. She's in the Hall of Great. She's one of those players. She's in the Hall of really good. And you gave up a 1st-round pick and a half for her. And now you're turning around. She's hurt this year. Guess what? She's not on contract for the team next year. So I thought, so you got no hope as a fan, like looking for like, oh man, she's out this year, but next year she's going to come back and we're going to have all these pieces, blah, blah. It's like, no, she might not even be back. And if she does, she's going to be 30 years old coming off of a major lower body injury. And that's just tough. It's tough as a fan when you could have had the hope of a young up-and-coming player. So that's why I wanted to bring that up, because it's connected to that message of like hope that you usually try and cling to in bad seasons like this. And that's one piece of hope that we could have had, in my opinion, should have had, but we don't. The one thing we do have is the Sun, who are the 13th team in the league, who only have 5 wins. And that is the team who the Sky have the first round pick of next year. So that is one great thing to hold out for, because it's going to have a decent chance at the number 1 pick. Of course, you know who else is going to have a decent chance at the number 1 pick? The Sky, who do not have their own draft pick. So that's not even, usually as a bad team, like, well, we're going to have a great pick next year. Not for the Sky. Not for the Sky. Now, I don't fault them for that much, because I talked about this a while ago, but the Sky gave up swap rights with the Lynx for that pick to move up to get Angel Reese, which I think was a great, very good deal. So I don't really blame them for that, but the Lynx, far and away the best team in the league this year, are going to have a great chance at getting the number 1 pick. And even if they don't get number 1, they're going to have one of the top picks in the draft next year, which is crazy. So that really worked out for them. But again, getting Angel Reese, I think, was worth it in the long run too. But man, giving up one of the top picks in the draft is probably not what this guy had in mind when they made that trade. I'll tell you that much. But they will have that pick. But then the Sky are once again going to be out of their first round pick in 2027. So you've got this one pick to rest on right now, which is not really what you want, because with the draft, you always want, this is the whole idea of the 76ers process, which didn't really work out, so there is that, but the idea is you want as many picks, there were many bites as the apple as possible, because you never know who's going to work out. Different drafts are better than others, right? This past year seems like it could be one of the best drafts ever. Next year, who knows? Who knows? I think, again, the average rookie is better now than they were in the past, just due to resources available to them. But that doesn't mean it's going to be as good as this last year. So we don't know if that's going to be a good year or not. You don't know if somebody gets hurt, right? Has a career-altering injury. I mean, knock on wood, you never want to see it, but it happens. It happens. People get hurt. People don't develop the way that you think they will. You get all these, like a Zion Williamson in the NBA, who comes in, one of the most hyped players of hype prospects in the 2020s. Or he came in even before that, but one of the most hyped prospects in a while, and hasn't really developed. Hasn't been able to stay healthy, hasn't produced on the court, hasn't played defense the way that people thought. Oh, this, that, and the other. And that happens too. So you never know when you never know what's going to happen with these players. So that's why if you have the chance to get a top pick in the draft, you want to go for it, because you never know what can happen, regardless of who's on your team at that time, right? You never know. Maybe whoever the Sky picked with that 3rd overall pick doesn't pan out, but they have another pick that next year, which works out. Or if whoever they get in 2026 doesn't pan out, then ideally you'd be able to fall back on, well, they didn't work out, that's a shame, but maybe they can be a role player, because fortunately that player that they drafted in 2025 is great. Or that player, or maybe that player they draft in 2027 turns out to be really good. But they don't have that. They don't have that. They're really putting all those chips in on 2026 next year. And then it's not going to be another 2 seasons until they can possibly get a good pick. And hopefully at that point, the team, if the team is still this bad in 2028, something's really gone wrong. And they've really screwed the pooch on multiple levels. Because as bad as I think the Ariel Atkins trade is, I would like to think and hope as a fan that it's not the kind of trade that could screw your team that bad. I think that it's the kind of move, based on the young core that the team has currently, that either one slows down the timeline of the team so they still become a championship contender. It just takes longer to get there than it would if they had just kept the pick, or it takes the team from one that is like a multiple time dynastic championship level team to a team that maybe wins one championship, which would still be nice, but you could always do a little more, right? So those are definitely big impacts, right? The difference between being a dynasty to a team that wins one championship, right? You're still happy with that one championship, but a dynasty is really cool. Or that difference of, or just slowing it down, right? Where you still get that ring that you want, but it might just take you a little more patience to get there. But if after like 3 or 4 years, the team still hasn't shown enough improvement to at least get in the top half of the league, then this trade might be even more devastating than I thought, because that means that the 2026 draft pick didn't work out too well, and the team also has not made any additional signings in like free agency and stuff like that, which would be atrocious. So we'll see how that goes. Now we're getting on over almost to an hour now, so this is going to be probably the longest episode of the show. But hey, it's been a month. As I said, I've had a lot of stuff on my mind, and what's great is the stuff like the CBA and free agent signing and stuff we're just going to get more into in the off season if we get there. So lots of content. Woohoo. But speaking of those, the last thing I guess I'll talk about before I wrap up is free agent signings. That is the one hope that this team definitely does have. And it's not really great as a fan because you can't predict it really. It's not, again, like having a player that's developing that you can watch, which for us is just Haley Van Lith right now, basically. Maybe a little bit of Maddie Westbell saying like, hey, maybe look for those flashes. But you can hope that they sign some big name free agents, which is not always the preferred way to win a title. Having, again, being a Celtics fan, as much as I do love that 2020 or that 2008 championship team, that's kind of what like cemented me as a Celtics fan. I've been following the team just a little bit before that, and then they traded for KG, who is my favorite player, and he means so much to me. He means so much to Boston and that team, and that was really cool to see them all come together, and they won the championship right away, and they continued to have success after that, even though they were unfortunately never able to get a second championship. But the 2024 championship was just different, where your team was built on the back of Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, who were drafted by the team. You watch them come from these rookies, where Jason Tatum is coming off the bench in his rookie year as the 3rd overall pick. The injuries happen. Comes in the starting lineup. He dunks on LeBron in the playoff. And then they come from that all the way to finally winning the championship that last year. And it just feels different. And you have a bit of a different connection to it because you've got to watch these players grow and develop over time. So I think that is really the most fun way to win a championship. And that's kind of what you saw with the 2021 championship with the Sky, where it was like you had those homegrown players like Allie Quigley, like Courtney Vandersloot on the team. Was great for them to get a championship together. But it's always going to have that like, well, we kind of won because Candace Parker came in here and was like, we're going to win. And then you did. And it worked out. But Candace Parker, as much as she's got like those Chicago ties, because where she grew up and everything, like she basically came here to win a ring and then left as soon as things went downhill. And I know a lot of people, I mean, she's still an absolute icon. She's one of the best players to ever play. She's a great media member now. She's done so much for women's basketball, but like she doesn't have that same impact as like when your team is built up of your stars that you grew there. Because again, as much as we had Courtney Vandersloot and Allie Quigley, they were not the best players on that team. Even Ka Copper, I mean, she was kind of homegrown at a little bit. I mean, she was not drafted by the Sky, but she spent most of the early years of her career on the Sky. So you had like a little bit of that. I mean, it's hard for me because I've only been following the W for like a couple years onto that point. So I didn't really get to watch those players grow in the same way that I did as the Celtics. Because Candace Parker was really like the one addition to that team, but like it's a big addition to the team, you know. And there was a lot of other like homegrown players on that team. So I don't know. Maybe that's the wrong comparison to make. But this team also has some homegrown stars that would be very important to that next team in Angel Reese, Camila Cardoso, and hopefully Haley Van Lith, who can continue to develop. But 2026 is going to be a huge year. And as I've said a couple times, owners are going to have to put their money where their mouth is. How much do they really want to be a legit team? And if Jeff and squad see this year and they're like, whoa, this team is a lot farther away than we thought, because they can see that even before the injuries, things were not going great, that they kind of take that step back, trade away some of the, I mean, they don't really even have anything to trade because there's nobody on the team right now who has any trade value because they're not under contract past this year. But maybe they try and move pieces around and reinvest in the draft capital that they have traded away so that they can have their own pick in 2027, maybe get an extra pick in 2028 or something like that, reinvest in that draft so that they can continue accruing young talent to create a team that can become great for years and years to come? Or do they take a look around and say, we've got an opportunity right now where so many people are free agents, where we're willing to spend, that you can make a championship team? Because as much as Angel and Camilla, I believe, still have to grow a lot before they're ready to be the best players on a championship team, you can build a team around them where they do not have to be the best players if you're willing to spend the money and bring in the right people, which is the key. Because frankly, I don't know that Jeff has shown right now that I would trust him 100% to bring in the right people. Because you can look at bringing in not just Ariel Atkins, but even Rebecca Allen and Kia Nurse, and I see three players that are very overtaxed in their positions, where you tried to get these players who you saw as undervalued where they were and ask them to take on roles that were significantly larger and more involved in what they'd been doing. And obviously the situation has been bad, but even at their best, this was kind of a stretch for them, and they did not necessarily rise to the challenge, I'm sure, in the way that they would have wanted to. And if you're not going to be reinvesting in future assets, whether that be signing young, talented players or trading for draft picks back, then you need to bring in real talent, not try and moneyball your way, because your team is just not talented enough for that. You don't have the talent on the fringes to try and moneyball your way to the top. You got to bring in some star power for that, I think. Of course, the person I've been thinking of is Arike Ngumbawale, because I think it's pretty clear that she's not going to be coming back to Dallas next year. They played their best basketball when she was out with injuries. She was kind of ostracized from the rotation for a while, and she's just been there for a while and nothing's happened. So I think she will be on the move somewhere next year. And I do think that there are a lot of questions around Arike in regards to can she support winning basketball, because she hasn't proven that she can. Not at this level. Obviously, at Notre Dame, she did. But at the WNBA level, at the professional level, we haven't seen it. And there's been a lot of external stuff in Dallas that has contributed to that. But at a certain point, if you're a great player, you got to win some games. You just got to win some games. So there are questions around that, and those are definitely things that if I were looking to bring her in as a free agent, I'd be talking to her about. But at the same time, she's still one of the best offensive players in the game. And yeah, her shot selection is questionable sometimes, but you know who's really good at offensive rebounding? The Sky. The Sky. And Angel Reese and Camila Cardoso. So if there's any team that I want to have a player on who can generate their own shot at any time, has the capability of going off and being one of the best scorers in the league, and on her off nights is going to have two of the best offensive rebounders in the league waiting there to grab those misses and put them back up, it's the Sky, right? That's the team I want her on, right? So that's something I look into. That's something I'm kind of clinging to right now. If you can bring in a big talent like that, bring in a couple other really solid role players that fit into your vision of the team, bring in someone who can pass, because Arike can't pass, which is another one of her problems. So that is kind of something you got to work on. But or I shouldn't say she can't pass. Passing is not one of her strengths, I would say at this point, from what I've seen. But that's a lot. I've already gone over an hour. Next, hopefully I get another episode in next week that's not as long, but we'll see what there is to talk about. I had a lot to get into because I took so much time off, but I'm glad to be back. So hopefully people are still listening, even if you don't listen to the whole thing. But yeah, thank you. And as always, despite it all, go Sky.